Hello everyone and welcome back to Joel's Journal, where we talk about everything to do with young founders. Today we're going to be talking about how I balance university, my 2 startups and this YouTube channel and the rest of my life. And yeah, let's just get into it. But before we do, to clarify, the rest of my life is not just some negligible thing. It's to do with my mental health, physical health, maintaining my relationships with my family and friends and so on. Now, I know some of you are probably already cringing at the title and are just like, this guy needs to take a chill pill, but you're not here to tell me to slow down. You're here to figure out how you're going to supercharge your entrepreneurial pursuits. Sorry, I really have to get this. I guess I can edit it out. Why am I saying sorry?
Joel, don't forget like last time, tell them to subscribe to your YouTube channel for weekly videos.
Well, yikes, you heard the boss. Smash that subscribe button, others I'm getting fired. Moving on. In this video, I will be introducing you to 3 general components of the balancing act. And I plan on doing a further 4 subtopic sort of deep dive into all these general components a bit later on, perhaps over the coming month. And I'll mention topics for those towards the end of the video, so don't forget to check that out. Anyways, back to the topic now. So, a huge inspiration for me has always been Gary Vaynerchuk, and by always I mean like the last 3-4 months. But essentially he says that you can be juggling either 46 balls at the same time and drop 7, or you can be juggling 1 and well, your life is just boring. And essentially everything just becomes about that 1 ball, and you just get sucked into sort of this area of comfort where essentially you don't have any room for growth or room for learning. And then the next thing you know, you're 35 and complaining about how you could have done so much more earlier on in your life when you didn't maybe have responsibility. So 3 ways that I balance university, the 2 startups, the YouTube channel and everything else. Number 1, routine is absolutely important. I start my morning with a workout at about 6 a.m. and if it's not 6 a.m. then it's 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. whatever, and then follow that up by a prayer. The run is like a 3.7 mile run typically, and to be honest, I used to do these quite exclusively at about 6 a.m. and then I was just like, some days aren't going to start at 6 a.m. all day, so move that along to whenever I could find time to do it, whether it was 0 degrees or 40 degrees. But I think I was really like tricking myself into thinking, 6 a.m. I'm running, that means that, I'm ahead of the game, and it's this sort of like mind game that you play with yourself. I don't care what time it is, just get your 30 to 40 minutes of physical exercise in every day. And with prayer, really, I just center myself and I'm able to sort of pray for my loved ones and their well-being, as well as, being able to go further in my pursuits. And it's always very humbling and a conversation, sort of, for me at least. In my perspective, if you're able to sort of hope or pray for the well-being of someone else, then really your world is already bigger than yourself. And when you're able to think of other people, you're able to sort of transcend that aspect in your personal life and transition that into your professional life. And that means that you'll always be looking at, for instance, the end consumer. What are the emotions that the consumer is going through? All that kind of stuff. If you really want to integrate personal and professional, that's one way to think about it. So yeah, really the little things from your personal life do creep into your professional life as much as you do want to keep them separate. But another part of routine that I would like to talk about is setting yourself a cutoff time. So at a certain time, let's say 7 p.m., arbitrary time, just say no more meetings, no more calls, just spending time going for dinner, whatever, coming back home and just chilling out, cooling down for 1 hour, and then getting to bed and then really going again the next day. And that's the only sort of formula with that. Normally this also includes a daily Zoom call with my family, because I'll be in London and just to catch up on their day kind of as well. It's really nice to sort of stay in touch, I think, and we've been given the privilege to do that these days. And going back to cutoff times, really I used to be able to do that quite religiously, but then with remote working and sort of time zone differences, it's really hard, and sometimes you see yourself setting your cutoff time just when you're about to pass out, and that's really not the healthiest option, to be honest. Number 2, try to build resilience from failure. Now that's easier said than done, But personally, I've had several setbacks, and I mean several setbacks, varying on a spectrum of extremely hard-hitting ones to just, things that I can handle and that affect my day-to-day. And some of them were life-changing to the extent that I dove into nonprofits and entrepreneurship, whilst others were just impacting my day-to-day. A huge part about the balancing act is just plain consistency and the willingness to get up and go again. Because it's going to be such a silent struggle that oftentimes a lot of people cannot help you with. I really believe that it's got to come from within yourself, whatever it is you want to achieve really. Whether that's to go a whole day without eating a packet of crisps, or whether that's going into your day with the intention of studying for 8 hours and then doing startup work for 2 hours, or whatever it is. No matter how ambitious or how small your goals, just please wake up and try again. If you don't get it the first time, do it again, do it 365 times, and then if it still doesn't work, well, you can come and hit me up and we can have a conversation. But then I think that if you're able to consistently and diligently sort of work on something like that 365 days a year, surely something will change in your life. And it's in those moments really that you need to focus on the gain and not the gap. I believe that was another Gary Vee saying. Essentially, every day is like a new uphill battle for a lot of us. And I think it's important to remember the progress you've made rather than constantly looking at, how far I've got to climb and like some really far off goal, and then all of a sudden you don't find yourself making any progress. Well, that's why you need to focus on the gain and not the gap. Number 3, make sure you're passionate about your work. Now, this one is absolutely essential. It's really boring and cliche, but it's essential. I can already see this sort of going off into like several tangents, but alright. But let's start with when you're a student at university, right? You have a varying level of academic endowment across the board. Some people might take 4 hours to grasp a concept, while others might take a week or two to grasp the same thing. I used to spend quite a lot of my time asking professors and friends for help, actually annoying friends and professors for help. So that, along with independent studying, essentially would mean that either I'd have to put off some commitments or have a really crappy sleep schedule, which you absolutely should not have, by the way, or you need to be able to effectively manage your time with respect to having shorter meetings throughout the day, probably a bit more integrated, rather than just having like 4 calls, hour long each at the end of the day. Don't do entrepreneurial work to the extent that it will excessively eat into your study time. And now I know that this is a debate young founders struggle with. But if you're someone who wants a job as a backup plan, you need a 2-1 minimum in most cases to be able to qualify for that job. And that means that you should be focusing on your degree above everything else. And that means spending more time studying or focusing your efforts on understanding and grasping concepts much quicker or better. Look, there's no set formula, but if there was one for the average person, and again, this is just an opinion and not to be taken as some linear formula for success in the entrepreneurial world, because that's just totally arbitrary what I'm going to share now, but it would essentially be classes plus studying should take about 3 to 6 hours. Consistently taking notes and finishing your homework on the day-to-day, then set up sort of 2 hours a day for startup work, 1 hour for exercising, 1 to 2 hours for socializing, and a 20-minute episode of Friends, because why not, right? Everyone should watch an episode of Friends a day. Note how I just said 1 startup. Now, when you multiply that into 2, it's not really a 2x kind of multiplication factor on the whole thing, but rather it depends on the time and sort of stage of growth that each of the startups are in. Sometimes one of your startups will need more of your attention than the other one would. At least that has been my experience. I've not always needed to be constantly at the helm for Reshape, for instance, in the last couple of months as compared to, 6 months ago where I was very, very hands-on all the time. And now I can have a little bit more time to sort of focus on my fintech. But essentially what I'm trying to say is you need a way or a formula or whatever it is to manage your time. Personally speaking, my schedule is quite crap, but I don't have any hedge to fall back on anymore. This is it for me, and I'm going to do just as much as I possibly can mentally and physically to make sure that my startups and the content that I'm putting out is the best possible thing out there. I mean, what am I kidding? I scripted this whole thing at 4 a.m. and right now as I'm filming, it's probably about 1:30 a.m. And that's because the other day I spent the whole day writing an exam and then wanted to grab dinner with my friends. So yeah, every day won't be a 6 a.m. start, but that's tough luck, and you're really not living life if you have to start your day at 6 a.m. every single day. I have mad respect for you if you do, but it's just not how life works. And there's oftentimes quite a lot of chaos, right? So just adjust and, go for it anyways. Don't make excuses like, oh yeah, it's 6:57, I'll wake up at 7. That's sort of the kind of behavior that you want to avoid. Now, I know some of you are probably like, Joel, what the hell are you talking about? To have a startup, surely you'll have to be working on it 24/7, 365. But what I want to remind you is that sort of quantity of work probably only comes when you achieve product market fit. And the thing is, majority of people in their lifetimes will not achieve product market fit, where you're sort of having massive user explosion and you're sort of trying to keep things alive and like things are failing and then you're trying to bring things back to life. So that's when you're experiencing product market fit. You shouldn't be working 24/7 if you have a startup. Just spending 24 hours a day. You need to be getting your 6 to 8 hours of sleep, like mandatory, because without that, you don't really function at your optimal level. So yeah, those are my general pointers on how I balance university, my 2 startups, and this YouTube channel and everything else. I hope that gave you guys a bit of insight into how I've thought about things, and this is just my story and how it applies to my life. Doesn't necessarily need to be applicable to you. So yeah, I know there was no clever book recommendations in there. Probably Atomic Habits is not a bad one to check out. These are just my experiences, and it's just 100% tested, lived, repeated, thrown out, iterated. And to be honest, if you could find a linear sort of formula for entrepreneurship, well, that person should probably get a Nobel Prize. And this need not work for everyone, but it worked for me. In the upcoming videos, we will be diving deep into 4 primary components. First one being the unfair advantages that are available to university students. The second one, the systems, checks, and balances that should be in place for us as young founders. Number 3, my personal experiences with mental health as a young founder. And finally, something I'm still working on, getting my parents on board with, essentially, the stages of conversation that I've had with my parents about entrepreneurship and pursuing it as a full-time career. So yeah, that's me sort of signing off for this week. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ask me your questions in the comments if you have any, or reach out to me on any of the social platforms, and I'd be more than happy to sort of get back to you. I mean, these are experiences that I'm going through right now, and we can walk that journey together. Happy to do that. I've been there and I'm still going through it, so yeah, just a DM away. Anyways, that's me for this week. See you guys in the next one.